All right, so the nice thing about this is I can flip back and forth between, I think this worked last time, but it just like locked up on me in the middle of it. So hopefully that will not be my experience this time. So let's learn how to interact with the database. All right. And so your assignment this week, we're going to depart from the book for a bit because the book doesn't dive into this, but I just think SQL is kind of cool. And it could be something useful, right? If you go into the computer science field, even if you're not focused specifically on the database side, right? Some people, that's their job. I mean, they're like database guys. And I can't remember what they call those guys specifically. They're just the database guys. They're the weird guys that sit in the corner somewhere and just answer your database questions. They're not really weird, but some of them are. But anyway, they're experts in that area, and they set up the database for you, and they'll give you so much space and tell you how big your database is allowed to get and all this kind of stuff. And you can also bounce like super hard query questions off of them, and they'll help you out with that. But and they're responsible for backing the data up and making sure that if you need to recover it, they do that kind of stuff. But as a programmer, like if you decide to go into a programming field, you're going to have to interact with the database, and you're going to have to be able to write these queries against the database, right? You're going to get your data in there and get your data out. And even if you're not a programmer, it's nice to have some awareness of this so that when your programmer is telling you, oh yeah, that's going to take me 2 weeks to write that query, you're like, nobody, that should take you 2 minutes, right? I know SQL, and then you put the fear in them and they'll respond well to you going forward. So let's talk about how you use SQL. We're going to start with a basic select statement. All right. SQL, like we said, it stands for structured query language. It's just a way for you to interact with the database and get information out as well as putting information into it. And so, like I showed you last week, as you read through this section here, and you're going to be reading this online, so you're going to go back and kind of go through the information that we're talking about today and do the exercises at the end. Now, I cannot stress enough, make sure you do the exercises at the end, right? That's going to be very helpful to you whenever you take the quiz each week. So you're going to do what at the end of each page? You're going to do the exercises at the end, right? But always click, when you see an example like this, click on try it yourself and play around with it, right? The cool thing is you're working in an environment that's not on your machine. And so if you break something, they've got to deal with it, not you. And they've got this set up to where, you're not going to break something. And you can always revert back. If you start changing the information that's in these tables over here, they've got this restore database button that will let you restore the database and return it to its original state. But you see on the side here, here's the database that we're working with. Here are the tables that are created in that database and the number of records in each of those tables. Now, when we were talking about spreadsheets last time, let's look at the attendance list spreadsheet, which is what I use for keeping up with attendance in here. And let's see. So we'll go to a different class. Here we go, the pre-calc class. And let's see, to protect the names, we'll clear these contents out just for now. If I'm thinking about a database, you know what, let's just do this. Let's add a new tab in here. And I'm talking about the customers table, for example, and it says it has 91 records, all right? So if I'm thinking about this in terms of like the way a spreadsheet is set up, what would correspond to the number of records if this spreadsheet represents my database table? And did I ask that question the correct way? Aiden?
What I'm understanding is that the row on the left.
That's what I'm looking for, exactly. So, we could think about our database fields as our columns here. So, our customer table may have name, it may have address, it may have phone number, whatever, in the customer table, right? And so I'm going to make up bogus ones because Joshua, since he wasn't here last week, reminded me that, hey, you just put your name and address and information and then posted it on YouTube. And I was like, oops, I did when I was lecturing last week. So I'm going to go out there and take that off. But anyway, so John on some street, right? And his phone number is, they always do this in the movies, right? 555-5555. And then we'll put Dance a Lot here and another street. right? And that number is 355-5555. That was back in the days before we had to always include the area code. So for this particular one, right, we only have 2 records. And it corresponds to these 2 rows right here. So that's what I was trying to get you to make sure that you thought about this as rows, in a spreadsheet, kind of minus the header information here, because that represents our fields in the database. But these are the tables that we have, and I can actually click on one of these tables and it will show me what the data that's in it. So if I click on categories, for example, the category table has 3 fields: category ID, category name, and description. And there are 8 records. It tells me at the top here. It also tells me over here in this area that my category table has 8 records. And here's what the records refer to. But this table, I believe, and maybe I said this last week, I'm pretty sure this is the Microsoft Northwinds database, which a lot of their Microsoft tools that you'll sort of be interacting with that sample database. And so that's where this comes from here, which leads me to believe that this is probably SQL Server, which is Microsoft's database product that they've got, that they're using behind the scenes here to make this possible. All right, so let's go back. So let's just select from customers. We're going to try that. So you go over here to the try it page and you click run SQL. Here's the statement that we're going to run SQL, and it returns 91 records from the customer table. All right, so that's just that's our first SQL statement. All right, we just wrote a query. We just queried the database and said, give me all the records from the customers table. So we're going to dig into specifically how you format the select statement. That's really what the rest of the tutorial is about. We're looking at different statements, different keywords and things like that you use to construct statements. And we're going to understand better how to interact with the database using this particular language. They talk about what is SQL here in the intro section. Like we said, stands for Structured Query Language, lets you access and manipulate databases, became a standard in 1986, and with the American National Standards Institute in 1987 for the International Organization for Standardization. I'll have to remember that. That could be an extra, a good bonus question later on. You never know. But here's all the things it can do, right? In addition to retrieving data, it can insert records, update records, delete records. You can use SQL to actually, I was right in the middle of talking, dude. Come on, man. Come on. I've totally lost my train of thought. What class is this? Okay. What is it?
Should we take notes of this and act like it's the actual textbook?
You do need to think about it like the textbook, but whether or not you want to take notes right now is totally up to you.
Not like right now, but like doing it.
Yeah, when you're doing it, I would take notes because you're going to get tested over this stuff, right? You're going to have a quiz next week that's over all the material that we're covering today. And so focus on the exercises, but also the details. If there's anything key as you're reading through it or as I'm lecturing through it, write that down, definitely. But in addition to, working with individual tables, updating, inserting, deleting records, you can also actually create whole new databases. Now, how do I think about databases versus tables? Like, how do I distinguish between those two? What do I mean when I say create a database versus creating a table? Someone besides Aiden. What can? Database. Okay. That's true. I would say that's an accurate statement, but I'm looking for a relationship between databases and tables. Joshua.
Database can have multiple tables in it.
That's right. So databases contain tables, right? So database is kind of the outer container for all these tables, right? So that's like the top level. So the first thing I do if I'm going to create a database is, and in fact, I would usually reach out to the database guys, right? When I used to work for a living. Actually, you guys are way more work than that ever was, right? But I would send a request and say, hey, I need a new database created. Call it this, right? Give me access. Create a user that's got read-write access to it, and then turn me loose. And so they would email me back, say, here's your database, here's the connection, here's the way that you connect to that database, here's the user that we created for you. And then I would do everything else. But they would create that top level database for me, right? And so the database is the container that has all these tables in it. And you could sort of think about that in your spreadsheet. It's kind of like your spreadsheet. You could really sort of think of this as your top level container database, and then think of all these little tabs down here, right? I could actually call sheet 1. I could call this rename. I could call this customers. And I could create another one that's called, and I got these other ones that are sort of getting in the way. It's alphabetizing it is why. Oh, no, it didn't. Interesting. Okay. But I have like my customers table, and then maybe I have an orders table. So the spreadsheet could sort of represent the big database structure, the container structure. And then I could think of each of these tabs, the individual sheets, as tables inside that database, right? So that may be a way for you to sort of wrap your mind around what I'm talking about. But you can use SQL to create new databases, also create the tables themselves, stored procedures, views. I'm not sure if we're going to dig that far into SQL, so we'll kind of hold off on that. I'm not sure how far we're going to go in exploring this, but anyway, there are a number of databases out there. LMS Access is a like kind of low budget, small database offering from Microsoft. They're big. Kind of if you're going to build a big application, SQL Server is what you want to use. MySQL is another database. They're talking about websites that use databases. And so these are sort of the pieces to the website, but the database is where I'm storing the information, right? And BMS stands for Relational Database Management System. Now, you guys, was it this past week I had you read an article on relational databases, or is that maybe that's the assignment for this week? This last week? Okay. So did you guys understand what a relational database was? Did it sort of make sense? I thought that article did a decent job of sort of explaining that, how the tables are related to one another. Here's a whole bunch of relational databases: SQL Server, IBM DB2, Oracle's a big one, MySQL, and then Microsoft Access. Let me say this, and I'll remind you of this again as we get to the places where they sort of split this off. As we're looking at some of these commands with interacting with the database, some databases do it differently than others, right? And so they'll say, hey, this is how you do it in SQL Server, and this is how you do it in Oracle. This is how you do it in MySQL. We're only going to focus on the way that you do it in SQL Server. So if they show you multiple ways, you can just zero in on the SQL Server one. That's the stuff that I'm going to be testing you on. Okay. Any questions just about databases in general and how, how tables are related to databases and just sort of the big overview information that we talked about? Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Syntax. A database most often contains one or more tables. Each table is identified by a name. So the name may be customers or orders. We've talked about the fact that tables contain records or rows with data. Here it is. In this tutorial, we'll use the well-known Northwind sample database, which is included with Microsoft Access and Microsoft SQL Server. And so here's the information in the customer table. Like we said before, customer table has multiple fields: customer ID, customer name, contact name. So these are all called fields within that table. And these are the records, individual records in the table. So there's one here with customer ID 1, and then another one with customer ID 2. All of that information in that row is what we refer to as a record. So this particular one here, with what they're showing us, it contains 5 records. And there's 7 total columns. If I scroll over, country is the last one. So let's just dig right into it, because I think that's the most fun. Okay, let me say the SQL keywords are not case sensitive. What do we mean by that? Someone besides Aiden?
Doesn't matter if it's lowercase or
Lowercase or uppercase, that's right. So next time I'm going to say someone besides Aiden, or someone that that doesn't rhyme with Aiden either. Aiden and Braden. Not because I'm hating on you, Braden, just because you've already answered the question. So I want some other people. I can't believe nobody else rhymes. That's interesting. And it's interesting that Aiden and Braden rhyme. I don't know what to do. Are you guys kind of, one's the alter ego of the other?
Yeah.
Which one's the superhero version and which one's the ordinary guy?
Wait, you missed Caden too. Caden.
Oh yeah, Caden. How did I not think of that? Wow. So the The Aiden sounds a really popular one in here. Cool. All right. So, and Joshua is a boy. So we got, never mind. It's Tony. Never mind. I was going to say Troy and boy. Do we have a Troy in here? Why was I thinking Troy? I don't know. All right. Never mind. Let's move on. All right. Let's go. Let's dig into SQL to the select statement. All right. And so since they're not case sensitive, here's the point. When I write a select statement, I could write that as all lowercase SELECT, right? But so that we can clearly identify the keywords from other information, and when keyword is a special word, right? It means something special to SQL, right? It means something, it's something special in the language. And so in order for those keywords to kind of stand out for the other information that we're writing, we're going to capitalize those, right? If you don't capitalize it on a quiz or a test, I'm not going to ding you for that, right? But it's not a bad habit to use the capitalization just so you can distinguish the keywords from everything else. So let's do if we want to select every single all of the data that's in the table, the way that you do that is select star or select asterisk. So asterisk means everything, right? Have you guys ever used that in like searching stuff? If you ever, like some applications will let you say, if I want to search for maybe the word, why can't I think? I want to search for the word make, but I want to search for all the variations of make. So like making, make, I guess that's it, right? Maked isn't a word. So I would search for MAK star. And so I say anything that begins with MAK and then anything afterwards. So asterisk is kind of a common symbol to represent anything else. And so in SQL Server, when you say select star, select asterisk, you're saying I'm matching everything. Give me everything back. Yes.
I know at least in Python, when you're importing modules, you can select either specific functions from a module, or you just do from and then module import and then star, and
that'll bring everything in. Yeah. So you'll see. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that this will apply in the programming world, right? You'll run into this where asterisk just represents everything. So if I say select star, it gives me all the data back from the table. But I could also say, I don't want all the columns. I want all the rows, but I only want the specific columns, customer name and city, because I know those are in my table. And let me just, let me go, we pulled that up somewhere. Did I just close it? Let me do it again. So here we go. Whoops. So I'll pull up my customers table. We see that in our customers table, we've got, these 7 columns here, right? But I don't want to return all 7 columns. I just want to return 2 of them. So what I do is I say select customer name, comma, city. Select both of those columns and return all the data, but only those 2 columns. So if I run this here, then I get just those 2 columns back. I still get all 91 records, but only return those 2 columns for each of the records. All right. Now here's something important to note. Even though select and from, even though the keywords are not case sensitive, let's see what happens if I change the name of my column to all lowercase and change the name of my table to all lowercase. It didn't care. Does that surprise anybody? That should blow up. Yeah, that gives me an error. So it didn't care, actually. But I will say this, not all databases will behave that way. Some databases are case sensitive, and I think even in SQL Server, you can set that up to be case sensitive. So it'll depend on how your database is set up. I would just say as a general rule, if you know that the name of the column is customer name with no space in between it and a capital C and a capital N, then I would always write it in my queries that way. Okay, so get in the habit of matching however it's listed in the database, because some databases will care as far as the case of the column names go. All right. Notice also it's customer name, comma, city. I can put space in here so that it's a little easier to read, and that doesn't matter. It doesn't care much about space. I could put like a bunch of space in between city and from, and in between from and customers. And I could even, so I could run that and it doesn't care about that. It's fine with that. I can even put customers on a new line and hit run and it's fine with that. So you can put space in there for readability and the system's not going to care about it. So that's kind of good to know. Sometimes it's a little easier to put some extra space in there. Why is this not coming? There it comes. Just so you can read it a little bit better. But if I want to add, in addition to customer name and city, if I also want to include address, I just do comma address. If I could spell, wait a minute, what am I doing wrong there? AD, yeah, it's like there's a letter missing. There we go. And add address into it. Now it shows up in my list as well. All right. So comma, you separate the names of the columns with a comma. And let's see what else they got here. Select star. So again, we've got an exercise at the end of this. Insert the missing statements to get all the columns from the customer table. What word am I missing here? Select. All right. So I just do select and submit my answer. And it says, it took me there. Hey, that's correct. And I can do more exercises. Write a statement that will select the city column from the customer's table. So how would we do that? What would the first box be? Select. What about this one? And how am I going to do the case for that? Right, I'm going to match it exactly like it is, exactly like they listed here. And then what do I need right here? From, right? Submit my answer. Dude, I am jamming. I could just keep going. I don't know how many of these they'll give you, actually. I can show the answer if I'm confused. Have they even talked about the distinct? Oh, it tells you how many there's. This exercise 3. So I don't think we've talked about distinct yet. So maybe this carries you on into some of the other exercises if you keep going. So you may only need to do the first one for each of these. Yeah, because select distinct is next. So any questions in general about select statements and how that works?
Are we going to do any of those on like the closer test?
Yes.
Oh.
So that's what I'm saying. That's why I do the exercises, because I may tell you exactly like they just said. I want you to return all records from the customers table, but only return the city field.
So just make sure you have it like where.
Yeah, and I may give you portions of it just like they did, have a blank there and let you fill that in, right? But yeah, you've got to know how to construct it. Okay. Select distinct. So what does distinct mean? Distinct means return only the records that are unique, right? So when I'm looking at, if I run against my customers table, if I return all of the country fields from customers, we see when I run that I get some duplicate countries here, right? Mexican shows up a couple of times. I've got, multiple Germanys, multiple Spains. I mean, everything's probably duplicated in here. Total of 91 records if I return all the countries. But this is a common scenario. Maybe I'm building a form on a web page, and I'm constructing a drop-down list for people to enter their address. And maybe I only want the countries in that address list to match the countries of the data that's already in my database. And so I query my database and I say return all the countries, but I don't want my drop-down list to show Mexico more than once and USA more than once. I want it to only show those unique values, right? And so distinct is a way to do that. And so if I add the word in right after distinct, if I add the word right after the word select, if I add the word distinct here, this says only return the unique country names from customers. So if I run that, now instead of 91 records, I only get 21 records back, and it gives me all of the countries. And so I can display a drop-down list on my website that only displays the unique countries. Now, what else is going to be a problem when I'm displaying my drop-down list if it returned it like this? Why would that not be very user-friendly? Yes, Aiden. Yeah, it's like I got to find USA, but it's like somewhere out of order in here. That's not very user-friendly. So I'm probably going to want to return this in alphabetical order. And that's one of the things we're going to learn about at some point when we look at the order by. It's the order by clause down here. So hopefully we'll get to that. What time do we get done here? 3:30? Yeah. All right. Any questions about distinct? You guys understand what that means? The following SQL statement lists the number of distinct countries. So I can use distinct along with the count, and counts down here. The count function is what they call that. So we're actually going to learn about that later on. But count allows you to say, don't return the actual records, but just count the records and tell me what the number is. So if I run that SQL, instead of returning the list of unique countries, it counts them and says there's 21. All right, so that's just a function that's built into it that will allow you to return the count if that's the information that you're interested in. And I use that sort of stuff in programming all the time too. Maybe I want to, maybe I just want to display a message at the top that tells you how many records are, you know, in the database, and maybe I'm building some navigation that shows you like 100 records at a time or something like that. So I'm building these little arrows in there that lets you go from page to page. But I need to know how to, you know, I want to say 1 through 100 of 996 or whatever. And so I might make a call and say, give me the count back. So that's how you would do that. Use that count function there. So see, okay, look right here. So this is the SQL statement, but then they give you a workaround for MS Access. Don't worry about that. If they give you a workaround for a different database or an alternate way to do it other than SQL Server, you don't have to read any of that. Okay, so as you're going through here, just ignore those things. All right. Well, I'm debating whether or not I should have turned the lights off because some of you are getting really sleepy. And it's bad because Lydia actually brought her stuffed animal with her. So she's set, right, to go to sleep just right now. She's got a pillow with her. Rarely are you trying to get all of the information back from a table, right? So we've shown how to narrow the information down a little bit with distinct. I can say only give me the distinct values. But usually I'm submitting some kind of query and I'm saying, you know, like I said before, return all the students in my class that are failing, right? And so I'm going to have some sort of where clause on there. So I might, so if I go to this example here, you know, if I had a list of my grades, select star from grades, right? Where grade is less than 70. Maybe I submit something like that to my database because I'm returning all of the grades that are less than 70 where students had a failing grade. So that's how we would use the where statement. We can narrow down our list like that. And so for the customers table here, we saw that there was a country field in there. And so we're saying return, we want to look specifically at all the records where the country is equal to Mexico, where the country is Mexico. And so the correct syntax for that is where country equals. And since Mexico is a string, I'm going to surround Mexico with single quotes. All right. I think it's fine if you use double quotes as well, and that'll depend on the database. But at least with SQL Server, I think if I use double quotes, it works just fine as well. It does. So single or double quotes there. But if I ask you this on a quiz or a test, I'm going to be expecting to see the quotes. All right. If you don't give me the quotes, your statement's going to blow up. It's not going to work. If I remove the quotes here, I get an error because SQL Server says you're asking for something. You're asking for something from that's connected with the text field, but you didn't pass in text. Because if I didn't put quotes around Mexico, it's not going to interpret this value as text. Okay. Now, if it's a number, you know, one of the things we saw in there also was customer ID. So if I can spell today, customer ID equals 3, for example, then I don't have to put quotes for that because 3 is a customer ID is a numeric field. All right. So for numbers, you don't use quotes, but for text, you do need to include the quotes. Some of it can be a little tricky. Like when you look at postal code, you may think, well, postal code that's a number, right? So if I do 05023, this should work fine. I run that, it blows up or it returns no result. Well, why did it return no result? That's interesting. Actually, I would have expected to see an error there. But if I put quotes around this, it should return fine. And that's because postal code field is actually a string or a text field. And the reason why is because not all postal codes are just numbers only, right? In fact, my postal code at the house, I can do it with 5 numbers, or I can do 5 numbers and a dash and then 4 numbers afterwards, right? So that dash there is not not a numeric value. So you have to when you create the postal code field, you have to say that it's a text field so that you can handle all of these other characters. So that's going to be important. Know the type of field that you're querying against, and use quotes where they're appropriate if you're using a text field. Again, what does the star mean here? Return multiple columns. So what if I only want to return the address, the city, and the postal code, where the postal code is 05023? How am I going to change that? Someone beside Aiden, Braden, Caden, you're allowed, or anybody else? Hudson said some stuff. Well, you've mostly just asked questions, right?
Well, what was the question?
Hudson, I thought you hung on every word that I said, man. Dude, I'm hurt. I'm going to demote you. I'm not going to call you Tony anymore either. Just joking. So I said, the question was, what if I want to return just the address, city, and postal codes columns? So how would I change the asterisk here? Anybody?
You would use distinct with those columns.
So he's saying I would use distinct. What would the columns be?
But they're not distinct, right? You're going for all of them.
I'm going for all of them. Distinct is when I don't want to return any duplicate records. This I didn't care about. I didn't say anything about duplicate records. I just said return only those columns.
Select, and then what do you say, like postal code? What else needed?
I said address and city. All right,
Address.
address and city. So I'm glad that you said it in that order. So I don't know if you said comma. Did you say comma? That's important because that's where some students mess up. They forget to put commas here. So you got to put commas between those field names. And when I run that, look at what happens. It presents the information back in the order that I listed it. Right. So that wasn't the order it was entered in the database, right? When I looked at it in the database, address came first and then city and then postal code. But if I request it back in a different order, then it'll return it to me in that order. So that could be handy. That's good to know. In this case here, let's see what happens if I do distinct. What do you guys think is going to happen?
The same thing is gonna come up.
What?
I think the same thing.
You think the same thing's going to pop up? Let me see. So I'm not putting people's names. I want you to know I'm writing Tony on the paper. All right. So Levi thinks the same thing's going to pop up. Yes, Howie.
I think it's not gonna pop up.
You think it's not? Are you just telling me that so I'll write your name on the paper?
No, I was just.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to write your name on the paper anyway. I'm going to write Lydia just because she brought Lancelot today. So let's see what happens. Run SQL. The same thing. Why? Because there's nothing, we weren't getting duplicate records, right? So we would expect distinct to return the same thing. It's only when you get duplicate records is distinct going to narrow anything down, right? But the interesting thing is, look at this. Let's do address and state, not state, country, where country equals Mexico. We're going to run that. That returned nothing.
Postal code.
What did I do wrong? Postal code. Thank you. Country. Who said that? Braden, are you already down there, Braden? So let's run that. Okay, here we go. So we get 5 records back where the country is Mexico, right? What if I add distinct now? What do you think guys think is going to happen? Nothing again? I got five records here that all have Mexico. You don't think anything's going to happen? Joshua thinks something's going to happen. That's a bold move there, Joshua. You guys are right. Nothing happened. Why did nothing happen? They are distinct. They're distinct as a whole, right? None of these addresses are duplicates. Now, if I'd had some addresses that were the same and the same country, then some of those have been filtered out, right? But because as a whole, the records are already distinct, that's why distinct didn't do anything. Yeah. So anyway, any questions about that? How to use the where clause? Numeric fields, we talked about that. With numeric fields, you don't have to put the quotes in there. They should not be included in quotes. But there's all kinds of things that you can use with your where clause. So if it's numeric stuff, you can use all of these, equals and greater than and less than, greater than or equal to. So here's my question. What if I said select address and country where country is greater than Mexico code? What do you guys think is going to happen?
Error.
Think error? Who says error? I can't believe you're agreeing with that, Howie. I thought you just were going to always take the opposite of whatever I said.
I think I'm gonna start agreeing with that.
Who says it's not going to error out? You can't lift your hand up twice. So several of you guys either don't care or you just don't know, right? Which one is it? How many people don't care? How many people aren't brave enough to admit they don't care? How many people don't know? How many people have their eyes open, but they're actually asleep? And that's why you're not doing anything when I ask a question. All right. So here's what I think is going to happen. I think it's actually going to return some results and not give me an error. Yes, Joshua.
Maybe gonna return results with more characters in Mexico.
More characters in Mexico? That's an interesting thought. Okay, look at here. It returned 37 records. But the more character thing, UK is not more characters than Mexico. So it's not that, but that's enough to get your name on the sheet, Joshua. The sheet of power. Why do you think it's
Is it the amount of orders from that specific country that's greater than Mexico?
the amount of orders?
Yeah, like there were like 5 orders. from
Like when they,
Mexico.
no, it's not that. It's not related to that at all. Anybody else want to take a stab at it?
Oh, is it maybe that the first letter is further in the alphabet?
It's alphabetical order. Exactly.
Do I get my name twice?
No, you don't.
Oh.
And here's the interesting thing. It's not just alphabetical. It's, well, I mean, it is alphabetical, but when you talk about alphabetical, you have to understand something. You have to understand that A through Z alphabetically comes before little a through Z. All right. And so when I say I'm looking for Mexico, for everything that's greater than Mexico, the case matters when you're sorting. Okay. So that's just something to keep in mind when it has to do with, is one greater than the other? A lowercase a is going to be greater than uppercase a. All right. Because this is the order that it views them in. It's just something to kind of keep in mind. But anyway, that's kind of interesting that you would think that these symbols wouldn't work, but they do. It just kind of, it looks at the sort order of it, which one comes first in the sort order. Have we seen this before? Does not equal to? Can't remember. Sometimes you'll see less than, greater than used together to signify doesn't equal to. Between, like, and we're going to learn about that later on, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. But is everybody clear then? So here's your assignment for this week. You're going to read from home all the way down to the where section. All right. I went through a lot of it, but I didn't go through every individual piece. And then you're going to do the exercises on those and begin to get familiar with SQL. Okay. And Lord willing, next week we'll pick up with and or not. But does anybody have any questions about the ones that we did go over today? Select, distinct, where, any of that stuff. Is everybody happy that Tony's back?
Yeah.
All right, welcome back, Tony. All right, you guys have a good day.
Thank you.